Jim Benning, one of the most polarizing figures in NHL hockey right now, is quite on the hot seat. Here we have a GM who has made some amazing draft choices in the past, but as of late has made some moves that are quite skeptical. But does he deserve to be fired after being 7 years as the Canucks general manager? And welcome back to another video of Hockey Never Stops. In this video, we're going to be covering the 7-year career of Jim Benning in a Vancouver Canucks organization. We're going to be looking at 3 parts. We're going to start off with his trades, then eventually his signings and his draft picks overall. But to start off, we have to go to where it all started. So on May 21st, 2014, the Canucks signed Jim Benning after it looks like they're going to be heading into a rebuild with an aging core. This was after, coached by this man. So he basically starts off by trading disgruntled centerman Ryan Kesler for Nick Bonino, Lucas Sbisa, and a 2014 first-round pick, which ends up being Jared McCann. And just looking off of it, the return's not that bad, but eventually those pieces get flipped into even worse pieces. At the trade line in 2015, the Vancouver Canucks acquire Sven Baertschi, looking for some scoring depth. He's 23 years old, and he might have a little bit of time and some potential left there. And maybe a fresh start will help him. Well, he was all right, but just recently he was placed on waivers and is now in the minors. And at that time, they traded a 2015 second-round pick, which ended up being Rasmus Andersson, who is a top 4 defenseman on the Calgary Flames. Ouch. But after the first year as Benning as GM, the Vancouver Canucks actually do pretty well. They make the playoffs and things are looking up. They lose in the first round, but they have some nice young pieces that are coming to place. The Sedins are looking good, and let's just hop into the next year. And so that summer of 2015, he decides to trade Nick Bonino for Brandon Sutter and sign Brandon Sutter to a 5-year extension at almost $4.5 million per year. This doesn't make sense because they literally had Bonino right there, and it makes no sense why they'd want to just acquire another third line center, and the only difference is him shooting right. And meanwhile, Sutter's still in the Canucks, but he's being a borderline third line center at best, and Bonino had 2 great seasons with the Penguins, winning 2 Stanley Cups. So in 2015-2016, the Vancouver Canucks absolutely flop, and Sutter does not do that well. So in the summer of 2016, Jim Benning goes out and gets analytical darling Erik Goodbranson. And it's crazy, not only did they trade Jared McCann for Erik Goodbranson, they also threw in a 2nd-round pick as well. Now, during the 2016-17 season, Jim Benning didn't make a whole lot of bad trades, and there was nothing that was out of the norm where he either killed it or it was an absolute flop. But the Vancouver Canucks were still pretty bad. And heading to the 2017-18 season, the Vancouver Canucks are still a pretty bad team, but Jim Benning starts to have an upward trend here where he's going to acquire some pretty good pieces. And just a small win at the 2018 deadline, they trade Thomas Vanek for Jussi Jokinen and Tyler Mott. At the time, people thought this was such an underwhelming return. But this ended up being a small win down the line because Tyler Mott's actually still with the Canucks and he's playing pretty well as a 4th liner. And in December 2018, Jim Benning acquires Josh Leivel for Michael Carcone. And honestly, that's a very good return for someone of that caliber. And somehow he flips Erik Goodbranson for Tanner Pearson. I still don't know how that happened. And this is kind of their final year of the rebuild because Pettersson is starting to come up and they just drafted Quinn Hughes. So while they still kind of suck, they're going to be making some progress here. So for the last trade here, this might be the trade as the reason why Jim Benning still has a job with the Vancouver Canucks. So at the 2019 draft, they trade JT Miller for a 1st-round pick, 3rd-round pick, and goaltender Marek Mazanek. Now that 1st-round pick ended up being a late 1st-round pick. The 3rd-round pick, we don't know what's going to be happening there, and Mazanek is just an AHL goalie. What a steal this was because Miller is one of the most underrated stars around the league and is at least a point-per-game player at the moment. And next up, we're going to be taking a look at free agent signings. And starting off his career, Benning actually has some pretty good signings with the Canucks. And going into the 2014-2015 season, Ryan Miller is signed for 3 years at $6 million, which was a pretty good stopgap overall. And while Miller was a solid goalie, he also had Jacob Markstrom in the minors or as a backup just developing, and eventually that would come into success eventually down the line. In that summer of 2014, he also signed Radim Bravada to a 2-year contract, and he had a very good season in the 2014-2015 year where he put up 30 goals. But he also signed Chris Tanev to a 5-year contract in the summer of 2015 at $4.5 million per year. And he gave 5 great seasons whenever he was healthy for the Canucks. But ever since the summer of 2015, Benning's only had around 3 good contracts. He signed Jacob Markstrom to a 3-year deal at under $4 million. He got Bo Horvat down for 6 years at 5.5, and Brock Besser signed a pretty decent bridge contract just recently because I think he actually gets a lot less love that he deserves. But man, you look at the problems that are coming down the line, especially with signing Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson this summer. They're going to have to offload some players this summer due to cap reasons and possibly sacrifice some very good prospects and picks. And I mean, you just look at like some of these examples that he did sign just recently in the past 5 years. He signs Derek Dorsett for 4 years at $2.5 million just for fourth line production. Lucas Spiza, 3 years at almost $4 million. That's risky. And of course, Brandon Sutter getting over $4.5 million for 5 years just for 34 points at the most. And I mean, come on, Louis Eriksson, that's the one we all talk about. I don't really need to get into that just because everyone knows how bad he's been. Ever since he went to Vancouver, he just fell off a cliff. Sam Gagner in the 2017 season signed in Columbus and he put up around 50 points, signed in Vancouver for a 3-year deal and just fell off. A really unneeded extension was given to Eric Branson for 3 years at $4 million, as well as Sven Berchi. And in the summer of 2018, he gave 4-year deals at $3 million per season for fourth liners in Jay Beagle and Antoine Roussel. Example, in the 2019 as well, they signed Tyler Myers to $6 million at 5 years. I don't know about that one too. He's an alright defenseman, but you might want to make sure you don't overplay him too much. As well as Michael Furlan, but Michael Furlan was probably done with hockey, so Benning is pretty lucky that he's going on the LTIR. But Michael Furlan was still overpaid. And these contracts have completely screwed over Vancouver for this summer, where they're going to have to sign Adam Gaudette, Thatcher Demko, Elias Pettersson, and Quinn Hughes. And they're going to be due for significant raises because Gaudette just took under $1 million last year. I know he's not doing very well this year, but he's still going to get at least $1.5 million. Demko might get a raise just for the amount of games that he played this year. And Hughes is going to get absolutely paid for the amount of points he puts up. Pettersson might be a bridge deal because you look at how much he's kind of struggled this year, but he might just pop off at the end of the year and score 25 points in 15 games for whatever reason. So overall, Benning does not have a very successful career with signing free agents. I think we all knew that heading into this video. He's really only had 6 successful signings for RFAs or UFAs, and 4 of them have been RFAs. So he's had 2 successful UFA signings, in my opinion, that being Ryan Miller and Radim Bravada. And then all of these players, 11 players on this list, are just very hefty contracts that he signed over the past 7 years. Next up, we're going to be talking about the 2014 draft, where it was his first draft as an official GM. And this draft was headlined by Jake Virtanen being drafted at 6th overall, where he could have picked William Nylander or Nikolai Ehlers just after that. And this is a miss because Jake Virtanen was expected to be a 30-goal scorer, top 6 winger who would be a very good power forward. And you know, he's been all right, but I think they would have expected more from him in the past couple of years, especially last year where he showed a lot of improvement. But right now, he's basically just a bottom 6 forward with not a lot of upside anymore, considering he's going to be 25 pretty soon, and I think he's basically just a finished product at this point. However, later in that draft, Jim Benning did make some great picks, picking Jared McCann, Thatcher Demko, Nikita Triumkin, and Gustav Forsling, who have all played NHL games. And honestly, when you compare the depth to Virtanen in this draft, it's been a pretty overall solid draft for the first draft of his career. And in 2015, he absolutely hit drafting Brock Besser 23rd overall in 2015. But here and there's some decent picks in the 2015 draft. Getting Guillaume Brisebois is an alright depth defenseman. He might become something one day, we don't really know. But then he also got Adam Gaudette in the 5th round, and he was a Hobey Baker winner. So overall, that's pretty impressive, just getting a player that good in the later rounds. I think Adam Gaudette's been a little on the fence this year. He's kind of struggled, but I think with the change of scenery, he can become something pretty good. Something like a middle 6 forward, let's say. But 2016 is definitely by far his worst draft yet, where he picks Olli Juolevi at 5th overall, and my god. And honestly, I don't blame Benning because at this time I actually had him at number 5 as well. And I really do feel bad for Juolevi because he has struggled with injuries and he might have deserved some better chances in the past couple of years where he's played well in the AHL. And up until this year, Olli Juolevi was not an NHL defenseman, but right now he's basically a third pair regular. So, let's see how it goes, because maybe he'll evolve into a good top four defenseman, and that's not going to be a huge disappointment at that point because they already have Quinn Hughes chilling in the top pair. But other than that, he didn't really hit on any other players. And at the minimum, these players can be 23 years of age, so they're pretty much finished products at this point. Unless you could maybe count Rodrigo Abels. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He drafted in the 7th round, and he seems to be having a pretty decent career over in the SHL right now. So maybe one day he'll become like a good depth forward. But 2017 was a huge rebound, and it was probably his best draft yet. Stealing, and I mean stealing, Elias Pettersson, number 5, was just an amazing pick and probably saved his job at this point. And he also got some pretty good value picks with Cole Lind and Jonas Gadjovich. And originally I had Gadjovich as somewhat as a disappointment, but I checked his AHL stats and he's doing quite well, and he's only 22 years of age, so we'll see how he does with the next couple of years. But they also got Michael DiPietro, who could become a starting goalie one year, Jack Rathbone, who is very good in the NCAA, and Petrus Palmu. He's pretty short, but honestly, if you draft him that late at the draft, then you might have something one day. And overall in this draft, he hit on 6 out of 8 picks, which is a very good draft in my opinion, because you're not going to hit on every single player. And as the last draft we look into, where we look at all the picks, 2018 was an alright year. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't horrible at the same time. Obviously, Quinn Hughes was an absolute steal later in the top 10, and Jet Wu has been a pretty good pick, as well as Tyler Madden, who's not in the Vancouver organization anymore, but he could still become an NHLer one day. So they made some decent progress, but we don't know within the next couple of years where they're going to be. And just looking at like a recent draft too in 2019, I'm just going to go over this pretty briefly. They got Vasily Podkolzin, who's being up and down in the KHL. We don't really know what he's going to be, but it seems like he still has some quite good potential as a top 6 winger. And especially Nils Hoglander. I mean, he's barely 20 years old and he's playing a decent third line role in Vancouver this year. And getting Hoglander in the 2nd round is pretty impressive considering he was just 2 years out. So does Jim Benning deserve to be fired? Yes, but I don't think he'll be fired within the next calendar year, let's say. I think going into the 2021-2022 season, Jim Benning is still going to be the general manager for the Vancouver Canucks, but I'm going to explain why he doesn't deserve his job anymore. I mean, you look at the trades that he's made, he's won 4 and he's lost 4. So that's a 50-50 split. That's just how trades go for the most part. And you look at his draft picks, he's had some very good picks over the past couple of years especially. He missed on Virtanen and Juolevi and Gadjovich to some extent, but overall he's been pretty consistent, and much of the core that he has right now is built off of drafting. So that's definitely his strongest point in my opinion. But you look at the free agents that he's signed, and I mean, he's had 2 good UFA signings when you look at that, and that was around 6 years ago. When you look at Tyler Myers, Michael Furland, Antoine Roussel, Jay Beagle, Brandon Sutter, who luckily comes off this year. And all those players are going to be blocking off some cap space that they're going to have to use to sign Adam Goddard, Thatcher Demko, Elias Pettersson. And the reason why I think Benning has at least one more year as GM of the Canucks is he's going to be tested this summer. With all these players that he's brought in and has backed himself into a corner, he's going to have to offload some of these players, and he's going to have to give up some picks and prospects. But a lot of these trades, they might come and bite him in the back, especially where he might have to give up a high pick or a very good prospect. If he has to give up Vasily Podkolzin or Jack Rathbone or any other very good player like Nils Hoglander in a trade just to offload some of the cap, he's in trouble and he's probably going to get fired. But if he gives up like a 4th round pick, 5th round pick just to offset 1 year of Antoine Roussel, then I think he should be fine. But overall, I think Jim Benning's on the hot seat right now, and eventually he's going to be gone within the next couple of years, even though I think he should be gone at the end of the season. So thank you for watching this video. Please leave a like down below, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't. And definitely let me know what you think about Jim Benning, because the Vancouver Canucks are still struggling at the moment, and he has a very limited time of being the GM, I think, still. But that's it for today's video, and I will see you in the next one.